All right, so today we're diving into something I think a lot of us struggle with. Finishing what we start. You guys sent over a book, How to Finish Everything. You start by Jan Yeager. A whole bunch of research and even some personal anecdotes where to break all this down to help you become a master finisher. Now this book. It's got endorsements from CEOs, authors, people who just seem to have it all figured out. I have to admit it got my attention right away.
You know what struck me was that it's all about practical advice, not just theory.
Right. And when you combine that with the research and the personal stories you've included, it seems like we're in for a really well-rounded look at this whole finishing thing.
Yeah.
So the book opens with a statistic that honestly floored me. 30% of people say their number one obstacle to finishing tasks is simply having too much to do. Does that resonate with you at all? Because I know it does for me. Some days it feels like my to-do list is multiplying faster than I can cross things off.
Oh, yeah. It's not surprising given the world we live in. Constant demands, notifications, information overload. It's almost like our brains are wired for unfinished business these days.
Okay, so we're not alone in the struggle. But knowing that doesn't magically make those tasks disappear. The book dives into the reasons why we struggle. And it's not as simple as just try harder, which we hear all the time, right? Yeager actually identifies 22 internal reasons people struggle to finish things. 22. It's not just about willpower. She talks about fear of failure.
Yeah.
Which makes sense in a world where everything's judged online. I mean, who hasn't felt that pressure? She even talks about something called fear of success, which seems kind of counterintuitive, right?
It does, but think about it. Sometimes the pressure to achieve something extraordinary can be paralyzing. She gives this example of an editor who was so afraid to make the wrong choice, to greenlight a book that wouldn't sell, that he ended up getting fired for never completing deals. That fear just shut him down completely.
Wow. That really illustrates how even fear of something positive can be a major roadblock.
And it ties into something you mentioned earlier, imposter syndrome. It's that feeling of not being good enough even when you are. A lot of high achievers struggle with this, and it can absolutely contribute to difficulty finishing things.
Because you constantly doubt yourself, even when you're succeeding. Okay, so fear of failure, fear of success. What other internal things hold us back from finishing?
Another one that stood out to me is devaluing the goal. If we don't believe something is truly important, we're much less likely to see it through.
That reminds me of the example Yeager uses, a late birthday card.
Yeah.
It's easy to think, well, is it really that big a deal to get it there on the exact day? But then she asks, are you devaluing things that actually do matter?
Yeah.
It's like, are we giving ourselves permission to procrastinate without even realizing it?
Exactly. It's a question worth asking ourselves. Are we subconsciously downplaying the importance of our goals? Because if we don't truly value something, we're not going to prioritize finishing it.
So we've got these internal things working against us. But what about our habits? Are there things we do that sabotage our efforts to finish things? Yeager calls them time wasters. And there are a bunch. But the two that really stood out to me were lateness and email addiction. I mean, we all know being late is rude. But I never thought about it being a symptom of something deeper.
Yeager argues that chronic lateness can actually point to perfectionism or low self-esteem. She tells this story about a high school student she coached who was constantly late with assignments. It turned out that the lateness was masking a fear of not being good enough.
So it's not just about poor time management. It's about what's going on underneath. And then there's email addiction. It's like we're all hooked on that dopamine rush of a new message. Yeager's research found some people spend hours on email every day.
Yeah, it's not just email either. It's the constant notifications, the social media, the feeling that we have to be connected all the time.
Right, it's that instant gratification, the fear of missing out. Okay, so we talked about some of the roadblocks to finishing, both internal and those sneaky habits that sabotage us. But this is the deep dive, not the deep despair. So let's talk solutions. Thankfully, Yeager gives a ton of practical advice, stuff we can actually do to become better finishers.
Absolutely. And a couple of strategies that really resonated with me are rethinking deadlines and something called the Hemingway effect.
Okay, let's start with deadlines. Most people dread them. I know I do. They're like this big looming cloud of stress. How can we rethink them to actually make them helpful?
Deadlines can be incredibly motivating, but only if they're realistic and broken down into smaller chunks. What Yeager calls interim deadlines. Instead of focusing on this huge, overwhelming deadline, we break it down into smaller, manageable steps.
So it's less about that one big finish line and more about setting up checkpoints along the way.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But what about this Hemingway effect? The name alone has me intrigued.
It's based on something Ernest Hemingway said. He always stopped writing when he was still on a roll. knowing what would come next. Research has actually shown that tasks that are almost finished have the strongest pull to completion. It's like our brains are wired for closure, so we're naturally drawn to finishing things that are already close to being done.
So if we can just get something to that almost finished stage, we're more likely to power through and actually get it done.
That's fascinating. And, it makes me think, what do you have that's almost done but you've been putting off?
Right.
Maybe this is the nudge we need to finally tackle those things. But what I'm really curious about is how we can apply this to bigger goals, not just everyday tasks.
That's where intentionally breaking down large projects into smaller, manageable steps comes in. It creates that sense of momentum and accomplishment along the way, like those interim deadlines we were talking about.
Right, so instead of feeling overwhelmed by the sheer size of a goal, we're focusing on those smaller wins that keep us motivated.
Exactly. And it taps into another fascinating concept, the Hawthorne effect.
Okay, what is that exactly? Well, research done in factories found that worker productivity increased when they knew they were being observed. Essentially, having some form of accountability can be a powerful motivator.
Interesting. So if we share our goals with someone we trust, it's like having a built-in cheerleader and accountability partner.
Precisely. And it doesn't have to be anything formal. Just telling a friend about a project you're working on or a goal you're trying to achieve can make a big difference.
So find your accountability buddy, folks. And remember, it doesn't have to be a big formal thing. Just someone who can help you stay on track and cheer you on along the way. We've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We've talked about internal and external factors that can make it difficult to finish things. And we started to explore some practical strategies for overcoming those obstacles.
And what's great is that these strategies can be applied to all sorts of things, from small everyday tasks to larger life goals. It really is about recognizing that finishing is a skill we can cultivate and improve upon. And it's not just about work tasks either.
Right. Yeager emphasizes that these principles can be applied to relationships, creative projects, those big life goals we often put on hold.
Those wish list items, it's so easy to let those fall by the wayside.
Speaking of wish lists, that section of the book really hit home for me. Those are the things we dream about but rarely prioritize. What have you always wanted to do but keep putting off? And here's the real kicker. What's one tiny step you could take today to make it happen? Sometimes we get stuck in fear or self-doubt, but even a small action can create a ripple effect.
It's about shifting our mindset from, I'll do it someday, to, I'm taking a step right now.
One of the biggest takeaways for me so far is that we need to understand why we struggle to finish things. It's not always laziness or lack of willpower. Often it's these deeper psychological factors, like those fears we talked about, or just bad habits we've developed.
Once we understand the root causes, we can address them strategically. It's like having a roadmap for becoming a master finisher.
Totally. And you know what else stuck with me from the research you shared? The concept of completion closeness. The closer we get to finishing something, the more motivated we become to actually get it done.
It ties back to that Hemingway effect we discussed. Breaking down tasks into smaller chunks creates those bursts of completion along the way, keeping us motivated.
Okay, so we've talked about internal strategies, but what about our surroundings? Can we tweak our environment to help us finish things?
Absolutely. One simple but powerful strategy is creating a dedicated workspace. It doesn't have to be fancy. A corner of your room, a spot at the kitchen table. The key is having a place where your brain knows it's time to focus, free from distractions.
It's like setting a boundary between work mode and relax mode. And I've heard that minimizing visual clutter can make a big difference too.
Yeah, a cluttered space can lead to a cluttered mind, making it harder to concentrate. Taking a few minutes to tidy up before you begin can work wonders.
So we're talking about setting the stage for success. A calm, organized environment that supports our productivity. But it's not just the physical environment, right? What about our digital spaces? Any tips for managing those endless distractions?
Definitely. Notifications are a huge culprit. Those constant pings and buzzes pulling us away from what we're trying to do. Turning off non-essential notifications can be a game changer.
Reclaiming control over our attention. We decide when to engage with technology, not the other way around. Which reminds me of that email addiction we talked about earlier. Any strategies for escaping the inbox vortex?
Setting designated times for checking email can help. Instead of constantly refreshing throughout the day, you dedicate specific blocks of time to process messages. It's about creating boundaries, just like with our physical space.
And I found that batching similar tasks together is really helpful. Instead of checking email every 5 minutes, I set aside 30 minutes in the morning and another 30 in the afternoon. It's way more efficient than constantly switching gears.
Batching is a fantastic productivity hack. You can apply it to email, social media, even household chores. Grouping similar tasks streamlines your workflow and prevents mental fatigue.
Okay, so we've covered strategies for individuals, but what if you're working on a team project? How do you make sure everyone stays on track and the project actually gets finished?
Well, several things can help. First, establish clear roles and responsibilities from the outset. This prevents confusion and ensures everyone knows what's expected of them.
Right, no more stepping on each other's toes or letting tasks fall through the cracks. Clear expectations are key.
Another crucial element is regular communication. Weekly check-in meetings, shared project management tools. Even a quick email update to keep everyone informed of progress and any roadblocks.
It's about keeping everyone in the loop and fostering a sense of shared responsibility for the project's success.
And don't underestimate the power of celebrating milestones along the way. It could be a team lunch, a shout-out in a meeting, or a quick email acknowledging everyone's hard work. Recognizing achievements and keeping morale high can make a huge difference.
It's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day grind and forget to celebrate those wins, no matter how small. It's about maintaining that positive energy and momentum.
And one final thought on teamwork. Remember that everyone has different strengths and weaknesses. Recognizing and leveraging those differences can be a huge asset.
Playing to each other's strengths, supporting each other's weaknesses. Okay, so we've talked about specific strategies for finishing, but what about the bigger picture? How does becoming a master finisher impact our lives overall?
It's a profound shift. When we consistently finish what we start, we build confidence, momentum, and a sense of accomplishment. It creates a positive feedback loop that ripples outward into all areas of our lives.
It's like we're proving to ourselves that we're capable of achieving our goals, no matter how big or small.
Exactly. And it's not just about internal benefits, there are external benefits too. When we're known for finishing what we start, we build trust and credibility with others.
People see us as reliable, accountable, someone they can depend on. It opens up opportunities.
And it applies to our personal lives too. Finishing those personal projects, whether it's writing that novel training for a marathon or learning a new language, it demonstrates our commitment to growth and self-improvement.
It's inspiring both for ourselves and for the people around us. Okay, so becoming a master finisher has all these amazing benefits, both personally and professionally. But let's be honest, there are always those tasks that just linger on our to-do lists, sometimes for years. Is there ever a time when it's actually okay to not finish something?
That's a great question, and it's something Yeager addresses head-on. There's a whole chapter called The Exception That Proves the Rule When Failing to Finish is Beneficial. It's this idea that sometimes letting go of a project or goal can actually be the most productive and healthy thing to do.
So it's not about blindly pushing through every single thing we start. There are times when quitting is actually the smarter move.
Exactly. It's about being discerning and recognizing when it's time to cut our losses. Yeager gives examples like when our priorities have shifted, the goal is no longer relevant, or we've realized the project isn't aligned with our values.
It's about being honest with ourselves and choosing where we direct our energy.
And letting go of that guilt and pressure to finish everything. It reminds me of another important distinction Yeager makes: achievable excellence versus unattainable perfection.
Oh yeah, we get so caught up in striving for perfection that we end up paralyzed and never actually finishing anything. Perfection is an impossible standard.
Exactly. It's so much healthier to focus on doing our best, striving for excellence within realistic limits, rather than chasing perfection.
So embrace the beauty of imperfection. That ties into another concept from the book that resonated with me, focusing on the process, not just the outcome. Sometimes we get so fixated on the end goal that we forget to enjoy the journey.
And that can turn the whole process into a chore, which leads to procrastination and ultimately not finishing. But if we can find a way to enjoy the process itself, we're more likely to stick with it.
It's like finding the fun and the challenge in the work, rather than just grinding it out. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. For those who are ready to take action, what's one concrete thing they can do today to start becoming better finishers?
One of the simplest but most effective things is to create a prioritized to-do list. Not just a brain dump of everything you need to do, but a carefully curated list where you've ranked things by importance and urgency.
And the key here is being realistic about what you can actually accomplish in a day. Don't set yourself up for failure by trying to cram in too much.
Right, and there are tons of ways to create a to-do list. Pen and paper, digital apps. Find a system that works for you and that you'll actually use consistently.
So what's next? We've got our prioritized list, now what?
The crucial next step is scheduling time for those tasks in your day. A lot of people create a to-do list, but don't actually block out time in their calendar to get those things done. And then life happens and those tasks get pushed aside.
Yeah, it's like scheduling a meeting with yourself. That task is now a commitment.
Precisely. It's about being intentional with your time. And to really stay on track, you can try setting a timer for 25 minutes and focusing on a single task during that time. It's called the Pomodoro technique.
So we're working with our natural attention spans, not against them. And after each 25-minute Pomodoro, you take a short break to recharge and then repeat the process. I love that.
It's a simple but effective way to boost productivity and avoid burnout.
And you know what else can be helpful? Creating a done list. It's easy to focus on what's still left to do and forget to acknowledge what we've already accomplished.
That's a fantastic idea. Celebrate your wins and remind yourself of your progress. It's incredibly motivating.
All right, we've covered a lot in this deep dive into finishing what we start. We've explored the psychological factors that hold us back, busted the myth that it's all about willpower, and shared a ton of practical strategies to become better finishers.
And remember, these strategies can be applied to all areas of your life. Work relationships, personal goals. It's about taking control of your time and energy and directing it towards what truly matters to you.
The biggest takeaway for me is that finishing is a skill. It's something we can develop and improve with practice. It's not about being perfect. It's about being persistent, showing up consistently and making progress one step at a time.
And remember, we're all works in progress. There will be times when we slip up, procrastinate, or feel overwhelmed. Be kind to yourself, learn from those moments, and keep moving forward.
As we wrap up, I want to leave you with a challenge. Think about that one thing, that dream that's been lingering on your wish list. What's one tiny step you could take today to move closer to it? It doesn't have to be grand, just a small action to create momentum and get you started.
Finishing is not about achieving perfection. It's about making progress. Celebrate those small wins and never underestimate the power of consistency.
So go out there, embrace the challenge, and become the master finisher you are born to be. We're here rooting for you every step of the way.
Absolutely. You've got this.